Hi guys, Chris and Vesh Rep here. Alright, I'm just keeping a close eye on this girl. She had a proper go at me from a feeding reaction. For those who don't know, this is the star for the show for today. This is a Woma python, and they're notorious for extremely aggressive feeding reaction, and anything goes as food, including your hand. She actually grabbed my shirt and pulled it back, so I think I'm not going to leave her out too long. She doesn't seem to be a happy camper. Let's put it back and we'll start the show. Okay, let's jump right into it. So one of the questions we get asked quite a lot, especially on our setups, is what substrate do you use? So today let's talk about substrates, what you use and what you look out for. And once, like I said in all my talks, if something works for you, don't change it. You have to, if something works for you, think, why do you want to change it? If it works, don't change it. This is now for the guys that either wants to upgrade, just looking, well, I'm getting bored of my newspapers, it's not looking aesthetic, I want something nicer, something like that. And we're going to go through all the cons and negatives from the substrate, the most common substrates we get in South Africa. There's a couple of substrates that the guys use where they're pretty creative. We're not going to go into detail about that. We're going to use on what's free available on the market and what works. And I'll tell you my personal input from what I've learned from substrates over the years. So I think the first thing, when I started, I used garden soil. In the 90s, as a kid, didn't know what exactly, how sensitive snakes can be. That's Nala, our new mascot, running around, and she introduced herself to the black-headed python, and these two are now still finding each other. So if you hear a bark or two between the shows, just see it as humor. All right, so number one, my all-time favorite, wood chips. Wood chips, I use the premium wood chips from Ultimate Exotics, but there's quite a couple of companies out there. I know Dynamic Reptiles, all of them does it as well. It works great for me, but you got to remember the species I do is a lot more lenient toward drier climates. On that 40 to 60% humidity, so let's call it 50 to be average. And they do phenomenally well on this. And I've started testing these wood chips a little bit on humidity. Some shavings, all that tends to rot, and that can create health problems. With the wood chips, I actually noticed that they can create, or they cannot create, they can actually handle humidity a lot better than some shavings and all that. So for that, it works fantastic. I wouldn't do an all-out tropical setup with this. I would use coconut husk or whatever, and we can discuss them all. But when I get asked about wood chips, they're not cheap. It's a pretty expensive product. When I say pretty expensive, for a 20 kilogram bag, you're gonna pay about 200, 250 rand for a bag. You get it for cheaper, well done, but that's what I pay for. And remember, that's not including shipping. Then guys go, but I can buy these massive bags from the wool for what they use for the horses and everything at my local malls. I think I pay for my mice like 30 rand a bag. The problem is untreated pine. Untreated pine secretes an oil, so it's got to be kiln treated. So it's got to be cooked out, and that oil needs to be cooked out of it. So these wood chips that I use already been pre-treated and basically deemed safe for reptiles. So watch out for that. Another wood chip or any wood bark that you need to avoid is cedar wood. Cedar wood is one of the known woods to be poisonous to snakes. It feels weird saying poisonous and snakes in the same sentence, but you understand what I'm saying. Okay, and also when you have a mite infection, the problem is wood chips harvest mites very, very well. So if you've got a mite problem, you're probably going to have to get rid of everything in here. And we're going to cover avoiding mites in your collection. I've been mite-free for years now, and I'll share the secret with you later and how to treat them if you do get them. But this is not the way to go with mites. The problem is mites, it's a haven for them. So you got to have a clean snake in here, otherwise you're just going to continue your own problem. But that's basically all the negatives I can think of, but the cons is just so much better. Number one, it looks aesthetically pleasing. It looks natural. Its spot cleans fantastic. I change the entire wood chips out per year, and I can actually push it a bit more if I want to, but it just feels, at least I should change it at one stage, because this stuff feels like it lasts forever. And also it smells clean and fresh, and any spills from your water bowl and everything gets absorbed, and that's what I like about it. So if I do get something that's messy in here, I can just take a handful and chuck it. The rest of the enclosure stays pretty clean, and every month I'll just shake it up and just make it look all fluffy and fresh again. Okay, so in general, I'm a huge fan of the wood chips. Just a little note, when you are cleaning a bit, just watch out your rails and everything. It can be messy, but that's not a bad thing because it forces you now to clean more. So, and when I say messy, when you take out, especially the larger snakes, when you pull them out, they do tend to push them over and it goes into your rails, and you've got to keep your rails clean. But if that's a negative, then I'll take it. It's not like it's a mission or anything like that. Okay. Then another thing that we get, I don't personally use it, but a friend of mine uses this with great success. And the reason I'm actually incorporating this is you get the finer, I think this is called Primal Earth. If you guys know of anyone else distributing it like a reptile safe, it's a very, very fine, more wood shaving than a wood chip. This is absolute magic stuff. Let us know. But one problem I've learned, what happened was I brought one of my snakes, I think it was the Woma that had a go at me back from one of the expos. And they love this stuff. Number one, as you can see, it's quite loosely together, and they're great for digging snakes. And obviously this is treated, like I said, this is Primal Earth, and it's a proven substrate. They use this in the state, and if I'm correct, they also call this aspen. I think this is made from aspen wood. So and it will be treated, but John Baldwin's been using it for years, and for him, he raves about this stuff. And I wouldn't mind using it, but I'm really comfortable with the wood chip. So once again, this works for me. I'm not going to fix it. But if I do run out of wood chips, I would actually look at this. These are more substrates for, like I say, your drier species on your 40 to 60% humidity mark. At one stage, you're going to get a species where you want to go a little bit more moist and you want to go high on your humidity. You're going to have to look at something else. The most popular humid substrate, and I'm only talking about artificial setups. I'm not going to go into vivariums and what substrate because they layer it up and everything. We can actually get one of our, can actually do a collaboration with on our reptiles at one stage. They're building great vivariums. They can actually go into detail with that. I don't have the knowledge about vivariums, so I'm going to talk about something I don't know. So, cocoa husk. Cocoa husk is great. You're just going to make sure you get good quality cocoa husk. Cocoa husk can be pretty dusty, so the best thing you can do is when you do put your water in there and get it up to humidity and everything, shake it around a bit. I've noticed that shaking it around a bit takes your finer pieces to the bottom, and you use the top parts and use that for your enclosure. Great for racking systems. And another thing that also you can use for humidity closures, I've used this for quite a while now, but I've actually learned I'm not that much of a fan, is bark. It's this brown stuff that you buy, I think Komodo distributes in South Africa. And yeah, one of the problems I've noticed with this is when a snake defecates, you don't see it. So even if it's got the same property as spot cleaning well, you don't see it. With this lighter stuff, you can actually see a defecation or anything that's wrong in the cage from just a visual inspection. With this stuff, you almost got to dig in between it. As I was picking it up, I actually discovered a small piece. I mean, that looks exactly like that. So a small piece of defecation versus a bark. And that's my only problem with it. Otherwise, it does look aesthetically pleasing. If you've got a lighter snake or anything like that. And once again, if it works for you, it works. But personally, it bothers me that I can't see what's wrong in the cage from a substrate. So, other thing, once we're in humidity, is moss. This was moss that I had in this container. I just gave it a couple of light sprays and it just came back to life again. This stuff works amazing. It smells fantastic and it's got a natural smell to it. And when I say natural smell, you've got to be careful of smells. But this smells like it just rained. It smells like the rainforest. It smells nice. The only thing is, this can be a little bit expensive. And what I used to do, and I still do it on my Amazon tree boas and the green tree pythons, is I'll actually use this as a bumper substrate. So I'll have my normal substrate going on in the enclosure, and I'll just add this in the corners or in certain spots, and I'll just keep on misting it because it comes alive with water and it just holds humidity fantastically well. So this is something you can look at. The only thing is this needs replacement a lot more often than what you would with wood chips or any other substrate. Cocoa husk it will last forever. This stuff, it does tend to look tired after a while. Let me go to the bottom here. This actually came out of a nest box. I use these in all my nest boxes. Great for nest boxes. Is they go flat and dry. This one actually, it's so effective that this one actually starting to pop up a bit. But when it's dry, it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing. Okay, so that's the stuff that has got a more of a natural look to it that I found over the years that works well. And most of the stuff, the reason I'm showing you this is because this is what's available at my facility. So I'm actually actively using it. And the feedback that I'm giving you on this is from personal experience. But now, especially the guys with larger collections, or you've got a great breeding season and you've got hundreds of hatchlings, it becomes a bit difficult to now maintain, because every time I put a new snake in an enclosure, these are established breeding cages. But if I put in, if I circulate the cage, I tend to sterilize everything, including the bedding. So number one, it becomes expensive. So what other options do I have? And that's where paper toweling and newspaper, you get that unprinted newspaper as well. Works phenomenally great. The only reason I'm not using it, a lot of people ask me, well, you've got a pretty large collection, why aren't you using newspaper? I just took a little bit more time and invested a little bit more in visually pleasing myself, if that makes any sense. That can come out so wrong. But newspaper works fantastic. But once again, newspaper, the pros, it's cheap, in most cases for free. If you go down to your local vendor and you ask them if you can have their outdated newspapers, they will be happy to give it to you. But even if you go buy it, it's cheap to get. So the same with paper toweling. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's quick and easy to change. So in a cage like this, I'll actually pre-fold my newspapers beforehand, and I'll just swap it out as I go. If I see there's something wrong here, I'll just swap it out. The only thing is it doesn't spot clean. So obviously when there is acidification or the snake made a mess or something, you've got to change all the newspaper out. And also no humidity. Newspaper doesn't do well in humidity. It does tend to mold up pretty quickly. And also with newspaper, I've noticed on big enclosures, it does hinder the snake's movement. It tends to slide around. I can't say from experience if it stresses out the snake or anything, but I think if the snake wants to move and he wants to use something to push against, let him. And now newspaper doesn't give it to you. But if it works for you, well done. But for me, it's just, we always have a laugh at the guys we see a snake advertised for sale, and guys will actually call out the specials on the back. So it's just it's not the way I want to go. If I'm going to keep a couple of $1,000 of snake, I actually want to display that I will enjoy the snake, and newspaper for me is not the way to go. Paper towels, especially on hatchlings, work extremely well in the sense of you can pre-fold to your container size, the paper towels, and you can swap it out every third or fourth day, and it looks pretty nice actually. It looks very hygienic, it looks clean, so nothing wrong with that, but especially on baby snakes. Enclosures like this, this is what we'll call for our snakes medium enclosures, but it's just going to be too expensive to lay this out with paper towels. What I like about paper towels, it's very absorbent. I mean, that's the reason it was invented for. So that's definitely one thing you can look at as well regarding the artificial range. And then another thing under the artificial categories, astroturf and carpet. Then while we're on artificial, something you can look at as well is astroturf and industrial carpets. Industrial carpet is a very thin carpet that you use. And when I started out with my very first commercial facility, I actually used that industrial carpet. What was really nice is I had a certain set of sizes for my cages, and each enclosure size had a couple of extras. So I would come in there, something's wrong, I would actually just swap it out, and I can sterilize and hose it down in my own time, let it dry while the snake is using the new fresh one. So it works pretty well. The same with the astroturf. You can actually have a cage and you can have an extra piece cut to that size, and you just swap it out. It just halves your cleaning time, and it actually does clean easy. And AstroTurf, I'm personally not a fan of how it looks, but it does have benefits, especially with scale rot and belly burns. It creates a bit of a barrier for ventilation, and that seems to work pretty well, because belly rot and scale rot, you actually want to ventilate and dry out a bit, because that's normally created from too much moisture and water in the cage. So nothing wrong with it, and if it works for you, go for it. Like I said, the only reason, and the AstroTurf, watch out, the only thing is it can work out pretty expensive after a while. This artificial grass that you buy at builders and all that, I'm not a fan of that. The principle sounds the same, what I explained now, so unless you've got belly rot, you can maybe do something with it. But that stuff, it just clunks up, and especially urinate crystals goes in there and it gets stuck. And I don't know, it just feels like you're not cleaning it the way it should be cleaned, where the other stuff can be cleaned pretty well. Okay, and then the last one we're going to touch that's still acceptable is sand. But sand is a bit of a double-edged sword. When I say that, you've got to be very species orientated for sand. I'm actually waiting for a little shipment, a small little bag of Kalahari sand coming in for our dwarf bitters, the many horned adders, no horned adders and everything. And I've noted that's why I'm bringing it in. I've noticed they do exceptionally well in that. Even your Kenyan sand boas and your borrowing species, they would do great in that stuff. But you do not use, number one, beach sand. So when you're on a holiday, do not go to the beach and pick up sand there. Number one, it's full of salt, and you don't know who had a good New Year's on that salt. It's unsafe, unsterile. If you do get it, flush it out properly and make sure it's sterile. And we'll actually cover a whole thing on sterilizing snake equipment and substrates and all that. If you can't buy it, how to sterilize it in your oven and using hot water and F10, for example. But the only thing with sand, I've noticed in breeding season, you can just imagine. In breeding season, you've got a hemipenis coming out and you've got mating happening. And on the flange, you'll actually get sand stuck on there. That male can pull it in. So it can damage your snakes on the cloaca area. And also when you're feeding frozen thawed and it's still pretty wet from thawing out in water or something like that, be careful, because the snake can actually ingest it and it actually compact the snake. So then you're sitting with a whole lot of other problems. So unless you've got something like a Kenyan sandbow or your dwarf beaters that occurs in extremely sandy conditions, I would not put these guys, for example, on sand just because it looks aesthetically, and I mean, sand looks fantastic. Garden soil, huge no-no. Garden soil, number one, especially in urban areas, it can contain insecticide. It can contain so many things that can injure or make your snake sick, and it's not sterile. It's a very fine thing. So soil, when I've got my very first snake in the 90s, the first thing I did is the fish tank was soil in it, because that was what was available for us, and it didn't work. Even looking back then, I thought it worked. It didn't. And it's just from a sterile perspective and from insecticide perspective, do not use soil unless it's sterile soil and you're busy building a vivarium, and then it will work. Otherwise, not a big fan. Completely off-limit substrates. Like I've noticed, like I said on the wood part, raw pine, cedar wood, and wood we don't know where the source came from. Stay well clear. So once there's a couple of substrates that's a complete no-go in my opinion, and I've learned this the hard way, and the corn cob actually comes in from what I've read up and what I've seen from other people making a mistake. And I can't believe it. There's actually red top products being sold as substrate, and you can see it's corn cob. Corn cob creates a world of problems. Number one, it can be extremely dusty, and that can create respiratory infections. It can actually infect the lungs of the snakes. And like you see in our previous video, John, once you've got respiratory infection, it becomes a bit of a mission to clear it up, and you've got to take steps. And you actually want to enjoy the snake. You don't want to be working against something the whole time. And I've also, corn cob is extremely absorbent, to the point where if your snake defecates, it can actually suck in corn cob at the cloaca. Believe it or not, I've actually seen and heard of stories where corn cob actually gets sucked up into cloaca because it absorbs into that moisture, and it just creates a world of problems on its own. And corn cob molds extremely fast. So if a water bowl does spill over, or there is excess moisture in the cage, it molds, and once again that goes with respiratory infection. So between the dust and the mold that creates by corn cob, I would rate corn cob as an absolute no-go. I don't even have a sample to show you. I was looking through my substrate here, but because I got mice the one day in corn cob, I actually threw it out. I just saw it, like I got this gut feeling, and I just threw it out. Then the other no-go substrate, from what I've learned as well, is aquarium gravel. You saw the little chat I had about aquarium tanks. The same goes with aquarium gravel. You don't see aquarium gravel / great substrate for reptiles. It's aquarium gravel for a reason. Aquarium gravel, number one, they tend to have sharp edges on that gravel. If you take aquarium gravel between your hands and you rub it between your hands, you can actually see small lacerations on your hand. So if something happens and that snake ingests a rat or something with a piece of gravel onto it, it can actually cause internal lacerations. So that's the one reason for me it's a no-go substrate. And the other reason is it's not absorbent, and it's pretty porous. So something liquidy goes through, it just goes straight to the bottom. Can actually, it will look all right, but you've got no idea that a whole puddle of bacteria is breeding underneath that gravel that's going to be coming up and later bite you in the backside. So aquarium gravel, no go. If you guys feel I missed anything, please feel free to comment, give your input, and this is just, like I said, this is from what works for me. Otherwise, guys, have a great day and see you soon.